I'm really interested in your MMA experience. We cover MMA heavily on Fightful, and you had several fights. And I know that a couple of years ago you said you'd pretty much focused on pro wrestling. That's where your bread was buttered, and you didn't have as much time to do that. How much do you draw off of your MMA experience and the crossover there? I mean, we've seen, especially over the last 5 years, just an insane number of people cross over, whether it be from wrestling to MMA or MMA to wrestling.
I used to do a lot of stuff involving MMA in my matches. I even before I fought, because I've always been a fan of mixed martial arts, and so whether it would be like leg kicks or certain types of strikes or way of evading strikes. I remember you can go back to like 2003, 2004. I was using a triangle choke as a finishing move, and people didn't even know what the triangle choke was back then. Everyone was like, "Oh, what? How does it work?" I'd ask people like, or not. People would ask me like, "Well, how does it work? Like, what do what does it do?" Commentary. So I said, "Oh, let me put you in it so you can see."
Yes.
So you know how to talk. How to talk about it. Around that same time, I was doing, flying knees for Muay Thai or clinch and knee strikes and that sort of thing. And I've kind of gotten away from it because everybody does it now. You'll see triangle chokes all the time. You're always seeing like head kicks and knee strikes specifically. I mean, everybody's doing knee strikes now. And so I just try to get away, and I'm always trying to think of how to be different. And a lot of it just goes back to actually the reason why I started doing MMA stuff in my matches was years and years and years ago. I was like 2 years into the business. I was watching, I think it was a PWG show or something, and I wasn't booked that day, so I was just watching it. And every single match was kind of similar. Everyone did like a lot of the same stuff every time. So I was like, man, except one guy whose name was Scott Lost. He was a guy who's local. You've interviewed him. Okay. Yeah. He was a local guy out in SoCal, far, far, far before his time. And he did a lot of things. Like, he was the only one to me as a wrestler that stood out that day because he did different things. Everything he did was different. The way he moved was different. And that kind of changed my mindset for the rest of my career, because now, still to this day, I'll watch the shows I'm on and I'll think, okay, how can I be different? What's everybody doing? Look at the patterns and try to be different from that. Even when it comes to dives, you see a lot of dives in wrestling matches today. So I did dive in like the tag title match with FTR, but before that I haven't done a dive since February, something like that, January, 6 months or something. Like, it's been a long time. So I was like, all right, everybody's doing dives. Let me see if I can get away from that. Everybody's going to the apron. Everybody's going to the floor. Let me keep my matches in the ring just to be different, and, going back to your question, I'm kind of going in circles a lot.
No, I love it. I love it.
But going back to your question, I went to an MMA style because of that, because I saw everybody was doing the same thing. And I was like, all right, well, people aren't really doing MMA stuff. Let me do MMA stuff. And then now people are starting to, over the last several years, people have started to do MMA stuff. So now I've kind of circled around, and I've kind of gone back to, the big thing now is kind of MMA, and now it's a lot of flipping. It's a lot of like, flip, drop kick, and, really aerial wrestling has come back. Springboard. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to, there's no way I can do that as well as Phoenix. So I'm not going to try to even do it. So let me just go back to a technical base. So I went back to my roots and started watching Bret Hart matches and like, okay, let's bring back the backbreaker and the Russian leg sweep, and let's just be a really technically sound base, because we're not getting a lot of that these days. So I'm always just trying to evolve, man.
You get some inspiration from like Mikel Pereira and do like moonsaults onto people off the cage. He's been doing that. Did you see the Joaquin Buckley KO this past weekend? That Enziguri?
The Enziguri, yeah, that was pretty amazing. I was like, I felt bad for the guy that got knocked out.
Of
I'm
course.
Like, that's a highlight for a long time.
Of course, cool, yeah. Though. And I mean, very rarely do you see those guys reemerge and sort of redefine themselves either, which is a bummer. Like, Terry Edom never came back after that Edson Barboza wheel kick KO. It's always just him going stiff and falling over. So, I mean, there's a lot of MMA influence that I love in pro wrestling. Like, almost everybody knows to turn their hips on kicks now. Like, you'll watch a lot of 80s stuff and you'll see people throw some of those kicks and you're like, oh my God. Like they just didn't
Man, I
know.
see that still to this day, and it kind of gets to me. Sometimes I want to pull guys aside and say, "Hey, man, let me show you how to throw this kick."
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, I mean, that's probably a little extreme. But I mean, there's little things that I'll do that aren't even physically wrestling. Like, I did this for years and years and years, and I just recently started doing it again a little bit in AEW. Is Anderson Silva and Rashad Evans would come to the ring, and obviously other guys started doing it. First it was Anderson, then it was Rashad, that from what I saw, then John Jones, then Conor McGregor, just right before the fight, crouching down in the
Yeah.
corner. You know what I'm saying? I did that for years and years and years because I was a huge Anderson Silva and Rashad Evans fan, and so I just kind of started doing that again. And just in a mindset, I always kind of try to go into matches as if it's a fight. I
Yeah.
always kind of want to feel like a fight. Like, to me, there's nothing like that big fight feel, man. Like a Pacquiao fight, a Mayweather fight, Bernard Hopkins, GSP. You know what I mean? Like, when it's a big fight and you're on the edge of your seat and you're like, oh man, your heart's pumping. You're like, oh man, I don't want my guy to get knocked out. Or like, don't get caught. Please don't get caught. And you're like on the edge of your seat for the first couple rounds. There's nothing like that. And so I'm always trying to create that like nervous tension in my matches where you just don't quite know what's going to happen when you're going into it.